Hey everyone, thanks for joining me today for episode 757 of People Behind the Science. I'm your host, Dr. Marie McNeely, and today I am joined by our guest, Dr. Lin Tian, to talk about life and science. This episode is made possible with support from our sponsor, Innovative Research. Listeners, Innovative Research has provided scientists with quality lab products made in Novi, Michigan for more than 20 years. Their portfolio includes human and animal biologicals, assay and ELISA kits, antibodies, and more. Products can be purchased directly from their website by credit card or purchase order at www.innov-research.com. They offer small quantities, bulk purchases, and custom orders. From human whole blood to specialized antibodies, Innovative Research has what you need to succeed in the lab. And today, our guest Lin is going to tell us more about her lab and her life. So get ready to meet another one of our fantastic people behind the science.
Every day, discoveries are made that will change our understanding of the world around us. Dr. Marie McNeely is here to bring you the brilliant minds who are making these discoveries so they can share their incredible stories and take you on an amazing journey. Welcome to People Behind the Science.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to People Behind the Science. Today, I am thrilled to be speaking with our guest scientist, Dr. Lin Tian. So, Lin, welcome to our show today. How are you?
I'm good. Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Well, thank you so much for joining us, Lin. We're excited to talk more about you and your work. And I'd like to start by telling our listeners a little bit about you and how you got to where you are today. So listeners, Lin is Scientific Director of the Max Planck Florida Institute for Neuroscience and a clinical professor at the University of California, Davis. She earned her bachelor's degree in neuroscience from the University of Science and Technology of China and her Ph.D. in Biochemistry, Molecular and Cellular Biology from Northwestern University. She then completed postdoctoral training at Hughes Medical Institute's Janelia Research Campus. Lin remained at HHMI as a research specialist before joining the faculty at the University of California, Davis School of Medicine in 2012. She began her current position at Max Planck in 2023, and Lin has received multiple awards and honors, including an NIH New Innovator Award, the Keck Foundation Award, the Human Frontier Science Program Young Investigator Award, and she's also been named a Rita Allen Scholar and a Hartwell Scholar. And today, Lin, we're excited to get to know you both as a scientist, but also as a person. So can you tell us, what do you like to do when you're not doing science?
I think I'm a scientist. Of course, I'm really busy with my lab. It's not just science. There's also mentoring, right? I have graduate students and postdoc, other trainees. And now I'm also a scientific director, so which means I will have a leadership roles to manage and direct the institute. So my life is very busy, but I'm also a mom of two boys, and they're 14 years old and they're 9 years old. So pretty much outside the lab, I spend most of the time with my family. If you don't see me in the lab, I'm either driving my kids to activities, or I'm actually sitting in the swimming meet or baseball game. I also have a dog. I could just walk my dog. Mm-hmm. I can do homework with my boys. For example, in the pandemic, I and my friends, we organized a robotic club for our kids. Of course, I don't really know much about robotics, but trying to do all kind of activity. It's really just me outside the lab as a mom. And also, I'm a wife. I do a lot of house stuff as well. It's keeping me busy.
Absolutely. I think a lot of scientists wear these various different hats, whether you are the cheerleader for your boys at sports events, building robots, working around the house to help your family. I think these different roles are parts of a scientist's life.
Yes. I think even a scientist, people sometimes imagine scientists is a different category. What I really just want to say that scientists is just a human being. We're normal people. We just work in the lab. But outside lab, we does everything as everyone else.
Absolutely.
You also be a daughter. I take care of my mom, right? So it's just a very normal life. It's just my career is a scientist. Yeah.
Absolutely. You're a normal person with a really cool job that I would love to talk about next. So, Lin, how do you describe what you do in the lab or at Max Planck in your leadership role? to someone who's not in your field or not in science at all?
Yeah, so that's actually a good question. So we develop technology. So the major goal of my lab is to develop, leverage, and also share some novel optical and molecular tools that can help us to characterize neurosignaling with the goal to finding new treatment targets for neuropsychiatric disorders. I think that's kind of a basic summary of what we do. Brain is very complex, right? So basically in the lab, we're committed to push the boundary of the neuroscience through technology development. And we have so much to learn about the brain and about how the neurotransmitter like dopamine, serotonin, they can change or modify our behavior and lead to neurological and psychiatric disorders. It can be difficult to detect those neurotransmitter changes in living animals and also humans. So my team developed those lab-based sensors that can make these changes visible. This technology can really transform, it actually has already transformed the way we analyze brain's complex signaling network. As we move forward, we're optimistic that this lab-based technology developed in my lab will redefine our understanding of brain chemistry, neurodynamics, and spearhead the next generation medical treatment.
Well, Lin, I think this is so cool. Just the idea of being able to see these changes that are happening in the brain in living organisms in real time, I think is absolutely fascinating. And I think working in this kind of area can be inherently motivating because it is, of course, just so cool. But do you have a favorite quote or a saying or something that just keeps you motivated to go into the lab every day?
To me, I really like Sidney Brenner's. He always say that progress in science depends on new techniques, new discoveries, and new ideas, probably in that order. So whenever I think about this quote, I'm committed to develop a new technology because those new technology enable us for new discoveries.
Absolutely. And I think Sidney Brenner is a motivational figure in science. And I think having these people that you look up to or gain inspiration or insights from can be really helpful. So when you look back at your career, Lin, do you have particular people who really rise to the top of your mind who were role models or mentors or people who you looked up to and who inspired you?
Yeah, of course. So to me, sometimes I feel like in order for me to be where I am today, it's really my mentors and also my fellow scientists. We keep inspiring, elevating, and support each other. So there's no particular one person. Of course, I'm always inspired by all those female neuroscientists, including Eve Mother, Erin Schumann, Ellie Ladivi, Carla Schauss, and Yang Dan. I'm inspired by those very successful female neuroscientists. But also, I have to say, with a fellow female scientist, it's kind of like you have this group of science sisters. We always communicate with each other to try to inspire each other and elevate and support. Also including my mentors. Although all my mentors are men, but they really play an important role in my career. I feel like because they have the faith in me, they trust me, they encourage me to always try harder and to try step out of the comfort zone and aim higher. That's really kind of drive me for the new technology development, also as grow as a person and a scientist.
Definitely. And I think having this network of scientists who, like you said, you can inspire, elevate, and support, I love that, each other, can really help you in your career. I'd love to rewind back to the beginning, Lin, and hear a little bit more about your scientific beginnings, though. Can you tell us what first started your journey as a scientist and sparked your curiosity initially?
Yeah, so actually I was born and raised in China. I grew up in Xi'an, which is a historic city in China. And I got my bachelor degree in neuroscience at the University of Science and Technology of China. During the whole time I grew up, my father, I think back around those old times, China was not very open, but he has always encouraged me to travel and also to study abroad, to see the whole world. Mm-hmm. So after completing my undergrad study, I started a new chapter of my academic journey by relocating to the United States for graduate study at Northwestern University. And I'm in Dr. Andres Matoshak's lab. study ubiquitin protein system, where we found some new element like motifs that actually important signaling pathway lead to partial degradation of the protein to active the new functional signaling pathway. During that training, I found myself really intrigued by the fact that we want to be able to visualize things instead of using traditional method, for example, to use a Western blot to look at a protein degradation process. And I'm really curious to see how those proteins actively transported or in action in the cells or neurons, right, will be able to visualize those things. So then that kind of curiosity brought me to Janelia, where I did my postdoc. I'm also, a lot of my scientific approach and philosophy is also kind of formed there while I was a postdoc. I'm really intrigued and encouraged by the philosophy that technology will be the one to drive the new discovery. And also the lab should not have the walls. So for people to be able to migrate freely across different labs or across different disciplines in order to develop technology or answer a particular biological question. So as a first generation of the postdoc at Janelia, I have hugely benefited from collaborative research and teamwork. I have been working, with Dr. Lauren Luger, Dr. Carver Soboda, and also Luke Lavis. They are protein engineers, neuroscientists, and also the chemists. So being able to freely migrate between all these different disciplines, we developed a really optimized calcium indicator, genetically encoded calcium indicator, to be able to visualize population and neuronal activity in living, behaving animals. After that, I finally got my own academic career start as professor at UC Davis, where I lived for 12 years. So where I really started to grow from independent scientist to become a mentor, to train students, graduate student, postdoc, and also including undergrad, where I really start to think about how we can really combine not just the scientific approach, but really to be able to mentor the next generation scientists and to guide them through the difficulties of the academic career, to really show them how to be successful. So I think this experience is really valuable for me to grow as a leader, most importantly as a mentor, effective mentoring approach. So this is what I really learned a lot. And after that, I moved to Max Planck Florida Institute as a scientific director. So I started this role last October. So my lab finally moved. After 2 months, we moved in January, and after 2 months, now lab is already hit the ground running. So it's a new chapter ahead of us.
I think that's phenomenal. And I love this theme that came through in your telling of your story, this theme of open exploration and this cross-disciplinary research and, kind of bridging the generations, bridging the disciplines, bridging all of these different areas to really develop new innovative tools and push the boundaries of the field. And I think that is absolutely phenomenal. But I can't imagine, you were able to envision all of this sort of as your future when you were just starting that Ph.D. program, traveling to a new country, getting settled in and sort of being thrown into the deep end there in the lab at Northwestern University. So what was that big transition like for you, kind of going from undergraduate to graduate school and also immigrating to a new country?
Yeah, I have to say it's not easy. That was actually, I don't even remember. It was like 23 years ago. Mm-hmm. I definitely feel like, to be honest, I really don't remember exactly, but with the support, I said, with the graduate group, my mentors, and also my fellow graduate students, I really don't feel like it's a big transition, and they really helped me. Actually, they accommodate me to get used to this new environment. For me to really focus on science and training, I just get inspired by others and then really being focused. I have a goal. I need to, as a graduate student back then, the only goal is to graduate. We have to graduate, really focus on, what's the next step. Definitely graduate training is not an easy process. Actually, I'm really happy as a graduate student and postdocs because you only need to focus on one thing, which is your project, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you can really focus on that and leverage all the resources around you to make new discoveries. It's a privilege. I don't really remember those hard times for troubleshooting because I think that's how our memory is. We often filter away all the bad memories.
Mm-hmm.
If I can go back, I still feel like my happiest time is actually my postdoc, because I really have the freedom, the fearless to tackle about logical questions with all the resources I can leverage. That freedom, that fearless is really inspiring. As a PI, I often feel like I don't have that fearless anymore because I have to think about, the student need to graduate, right?
Mm-hmm.
I have to really gauge the risk factors. But I really miss the time when I can be fearless.
Yeah, I think as a PI, those responsibilities start mounting. You start to feel the weight on your shoulders a little bit, but you are doing some phenomenal research there in your lab currently. So I'd love to talk about some of your current work. Lynn, can you give us maybe a high-level description of the project that you are working on at the moment that you are just the most excited about?
Yeah, sure. So right now we have 3 different scientific directions. The first one is our core. It's technology development, basically to develop genetically encoded sensors for all kinds of neurochemicals in the brain. And also we want to take the novel molecular scaffold and integrate with computational modeling, for example, machine learning and AI, to be able to develop those new generation tools, sensors for better function. For example, fast kinetics, very bright, so you don't have to express them a lot in the cells, and also have a specificity and high dynamic range for robust optical measuring of those neurochemicals in the brain in living behaving animals. And we're also trying to push the color spectrum because we know in the brain, the neurotransmitter all work together, right? They work together, interact with each other and to the integrated signal to modify the synaptic plasticity and the circuit dynamics. So we want to be able to measure all those transmitters simultaneously. To do that, we need a different color spectrum. So ideally, we're hoping we can measure about 5 or 6 of those chemicals at the same time with advanced microscopy. So this is the first part of my research, is to develop a toolkit of those neurotransmitter, neuromodulator, neuropeptide sensors. And currently, we're supported by NIH Initiative. We also have 35 beta testers for cross-validate those tools. The ultimate goal is to really disseminate to the end users either before or after publication and facilitate new discovery in neuromodulation and push the development of computational modeling of those neurodynamics. So this is kind of really a teamwork from tool development, validation, and all the way to the dissemination. As we demonstrate for our publication, we have always been working with different groups to be able to speed up or streamline the tool development, validation, and dissemination, which turned out to be really a great teamwork to benefit the broader neuroscience community.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah. Another direction we're focusing on is astrocytes. So as you know, we heard a lot about neurons, right? But in the brain, there's 2 major types of cell, neuron and glia. And astrocyte is also the major cell type of glia cells. So for a long time, astrocyte has been considered as a supporting role. They provide the structure support for the neuron network. But now with some discovery, we now start to think about astrocytes. It's actually, they have an essential role in neurocircuit function and pathology through regulating the formation and function of synapse. Speaking of astrocytes, it has been a long history for my lab to work on astrocytes. We started with some support from Hartwell Foundation to look at the functional role of astrocytes in Down syndrome. And then we also collaborate with Dr. Guo Chang-Yu's lab to develop some imaging analysis tools to be able to analyze complex astrocyte calcium dynamics. And now finally, my lab is able to team up with other labs such as Axon Lemon-Gel and Carla Iguru's lab at Duke to be able to form this team science supported by NIH U19. We call us exercise team to finally be able to develop a novel approach to identify molecular, cellular, and circuit components of exercise neuron interaction that contribute to behavior. We really hope we can develop a deep mechanistic understanding of exercise functional role in neurocircuit operation and complex behavior, and also as part of this player for brain computational theories. And finally, we also focus on personalized medicine development through imaging. This part of the direction is really trying to push the transformative potentials for those technology developed, and in particular utilize this technology for therapeutic treatment for mental health. As you may know, like those sensors, some of those sensors are actually based on G-protein coupled receptors. They are, 37% of the FDA-approved drug targeting G-protein coupled receptors. They are the natural receptor for neurotransmitter and neuromodulator and the neuropeptides. So we, for example, have developed some imaging-based platform to be able to predict hallucinogenic potentials of chemical scaffold for antidepressant, but without hallucination effect. So now we're hoping to be able to combine with iPSC technology to really look at how the human brain in the culture works and how the neurotransmitter is communicate with each other and what goes wrong with human-specific gene manipulation. And we also want to use this platform for new drug discoveries and to really look at the drugs that can more like personalize the drugs for treatment. I'll give you one example. So for example, now with the iPSC technology, we can express patient-specific gene, for example, encode serotonin transporter, right? Because we know serotonin transporter is associated with depression. So now we can actually really look at serotonin dynamics with those genetic background. And now we can use the platform to look at how those blocker, for example, SSRIs or psychedelic, they actually affect the serotonin dynamics, right? And as we know, because our genetic background is different, we have different response to the different SSRI. So this way, we can actually develop the platform to test those drugs in advance before we give to patients. So really hoping those imaging-based platform not only used for basic science discovery, but also be able to transform the way for therapeutics in the future.
Definitely. Well, Lin, I think this work is super exciting. And I know to do high quality groundbreaking research, you have to have the right tools and supplies. And now we'd like to take a moment to thank our sponsor, Innovative Research, and to talk about their portfolio of chemiluminescence immunoassay kits, which offer high sensitivity, specificity, and reproducibility. These kits are designed for research targeting diagnostics, pharmaceuticals or forensics, as well as environmental monitoring, food safety, and agriculture research. Visit www.innov-research.com to view their entire line of chemiluminescence immunoassay kits. And returning to the conversation with Lin, just listening to you logically walk through your research step by step, you almost make it sound easy or so straightforward. But I know working on the cutting edge of science on these big collaborative research projects, there are challenges, and I'd love to hear about some of them. So, Lin, do you have an example of a major challenge that you faced or a failure that you've had to overcome? And if so, could you walk us through it?
Yeah. I think science is not easy, right? There's troubleshooting. So this is often troubleshooting usually takes a very long time. So basically what we want to do is we want to kind of zoom out of the problem. Let's say, okay, this is a problem we need to troubleshoot. Who has expertise? We can reach out. So basically this is a way about the team science. I'm a big believer of team science because I feel like each of us can be smart, but if we put our heads together, they'll make a difference, right? So whenever we have a problem with, for example, experiment doesn't go as you expected, First of all, we can really start to think about, like, zoom out from this problem to see, okay, can we think from different perspective? Can we think out of our field technique we use? Is any other things can help us? Then I would reach out to those labs to work together for the troubleshooting. And from a different perspective, I always encourage my trainees that actually when you have the challenges, it's a good thing because life is just a change, right? It's constantly challenges present to you. So troubleshooting is actually really good because during those troubleshooting, just bring you to another level with persistence. It's basically the training of persistence. And it's a battling of your mind of the positive and the negative thoughts. How can you just focus on positive and be more proactive for troubleshooting than being negative and just keep thinking that things not going to work out? Because things will always work out. It's just you have to take a different approach. So I feel like in general for science, the troubleshooting is actually happening at the daily basis. And it's really a battlefield of the mind. Just give you an example, like relocating my lab from Davis to Florida, it is not easy. Not only we have to move the lab equipment, I also moved 12 people from California to Florida.
Oh, wow.
And then my family and my dog across the country. So, but I could not do this alone. It's really a teamwork. Every lab member have to pitch in however they could. And then we have to be patient and we have to have our responsibility. And then we have to be able to communicate with other scientists and to navigate, the problem if we kind of facing some challenges. We want to ask what's their experience, what's their opinions. So just being proactive to seek some help, support, I think is really important. And then once you have everything together and how can I make a decision? How do I face those challenges?
Well, certainly. And I think your optimism and positive attitude really shine through in that response there. And I think you're absolutely right. If something's easy, then you're probably not pushing yourself hard enough in science, or you're not exploring an interesting question, because these challenges are just part of the process. But we don't just want to focus on the negatives. I'd love to talk about the successes as well. I know, Lin, you have many to celebrate. So do you have a favorite success story, whether it was a big one or just a small but particularly meaningful one?
A successful story? I think if just recently, I feel like being able to become a scientific director at Max Planck is a success. From the field, I'm now going from professor, vice chair position at UC Davis, going from a public university focused on education to a private institute that focuses on research. It's a success, confirmation for my last 12 years of work. I'm still dedicated to education, but I feel like now I can focus on research and to really tackle some of the hardest questions or challenges without limitation or constraint of the funding. So I'm really actually grateful for this new opportunity.
Absolutely. I know the Max Planck Florida Institute is a phenomenal place to be doing science. So what was your reaction when you found that you got the offer for this position?
That's actually a good question. I guess I'm very excited for this opportunity. But at the same time, I do miss my role as a professor, which is education focused. I got to interact with undergrads, the next generation scientists at different stage, right? At a different stage of a career. But I also miss the time when I was a postdoc at Janelia, because as you know, Janelia is an internal funded research institute and really encourage collaboration. As a trainee, I feel like I really benefit from the fact that lab does not have walls, so I can freely migrate different labs and leverage all the new technology. So I really miss that fearless and to miss the fact that we can really leverage resource to tackle a question. That's why I'm excited about Max Planck Florida Institute, because it's a similar concept. It's a small scale of Janelia where we can just focus on the big questions and being fearless to tackle those difficult questions, without the constraint of the fear or the constraint of the funding.
Oh, absolutely.
So we just need to focus on those big ideas and to tackle the question with all the support. I think for the next 10 years, at least that's what I really want to. I see the challenge to be able to fully understand the neurodynamics and develop a computational understanding of how our brain works. And that's really the basic ground to develop new therapeutics for the future, especially mental health problem, which, really take a big toll out, especially after pandemic. I really appreciate this opportunity because I feel like I can be fearless again to push the boundary of neuroscience.
Oh,
yeah,
definitely. And I think, Lin, it's really cool that you've been able to see and work in all of these different environments. So you can kind of weigh the pros and the cons, the things that you miss and the things that you love with this new position. And I know working in a new position can often inspire you to spend extra time in the lab. Like you said, you're working to get everything up and running again. You're kind of frantically getting everyone situated in their new environment. But I think it's helpful to take a break. And we always recommend for our listeners to read for fun, to expand their minds. So do you have a book that you would like to recommend for me and our listeners today, whether it's related to science or not?
Yeah, absolutely. I think one of the books I really like is called Battlefield of the Mind by Joyce Meyer. I like this book just because, especially, again, in the difficult time when we're facing challenges, we often have a lot of negative thoughts, right? So it's a battleground of the positive and negative. For example, when you run a marathon, it's really hard to finish just because on one side of me will say, oh, I'm too tired, I need to stop, right? But on the other side, if you say, okay, I will be able to do it. Right. So life is all about that. It's a battleground of your mind. Since, we study neurodynamics, I'm actually really curious, how the neural circuit works for the positive and negative. And it's really a battlefield of the mind. So I would highly recommend this book to our listeners. It's actually really helped me to be positive, optimistic.
Well, wonderful recommendation. Well, we'll put this book on our website for our listeners to find. Battlefield of the Mind, listeners. And we've talked about some different aspects of your career as a scientist, including some of the different places that you've been to train in these different parts of your career. But I think the travel is something that a lot of people don't necessarily think about when they're considering careers in science, but you do get to travel quite a bit for conferences, to work with colleagues and collaborators. So do you have a favorite place, Lin, that your science has taken you?
Yeah, absolutely. I feel like I often talking to, especially for high school students, right? And trying to kind of lure them to the STEM field. I told them, being a scientist means you got to travel to all kinds of places.
Oh, yeah.
You're going to meet all kinds of interesting people to have all the brightest mind together to solve, one particular scientific questions. So, for example, I was in Berlin to attend a Max Planck section meeting. And right after that, I went to Rome for the Parkinson ASAP Foundation Investigator meeting. It's really a great meeting to bring everyone from different disciplines together to be able to figure out a better way, to accelerate the pace of discovery and inform the path to acute Parkinson disorders. So I really enjoyed that. But I know your question about the favorite place, right?
It's hard to pick one.
Yeah, I guess it's really hard to pick a particular place. But yeah, I do enjoy travel, meeting with different people. I think that's actually a perk as a scientist. We got to travel a lot to different places. I don't have a favorite place for science, but I do have a favorite place for life. I love Hawaii.
Oh, really?
Particular Maui. I feel like that's gave me a lot of inspirations. I go to Maui almost every year. I feel like I'm very productive over there. Maybe that also drives me to move to a beach town, which, where I live right now is Jupiter, where MPFI locates. The ocean gave me a lot of inspiration and really soothes my internal state.
That's absolutely wonderful. So if our listeners are able to travel, you mentioned a few different places, Berlin, Rome, and of course, Maui. If they're able to travel to any of these destinations, do you have suggestions for things that they must see or do while they're there?
Yeah, of course. For Rome, apparently everywhere you go, you cannot go wrong, right? The good food, gelato, tiramisu.
Oh, yeah.
They give us an afternoon off, and we went on our tour to Colosseum and also the Vanity Museum, Sistine Chapel. So all those places, please check out. And it's kind of lucky. We went together, three of us, with Anna Grandinaru at Caltech, and also Yang Dan from UC Berkeley. We kind of like become science sisters and explore, those historic places in the middle of the meeting. But it's also kind of funny, like remind us, in the old days, people, they don't live too long. So that's why they don't have Parkinson's disease. They don't have to worry about it.
Absolutely. And I think that comment that you made about these science sisters that you've met is a perfect segue to our next question, because I think by traveling, by going to all these different places and working with these different people, you make a lot of friends in science and you realize that scientists don't often meet the stereotypes, right, Lynn? I think there are certain ways that scientists are often portrayed in the media as these sort of white-coated robots working in the lab all the time. But that's not the case. So do you have examples that you could share of maybe quirky traditions or just fun or funny memories that really show this human side of science that goes against those stereotypes?
As I said, scientists just normal people, especially for me, because I feel like, especially as female scientists, we're not different from other females. I'm a mom, I'm a wife, I have 2 kids. I volunteer in the school as well. I'm a scientist. That's just my career. That's what I do. I'm driven by curiosity. I want to discover new things. I want to develop new technology to make this world better. But I'm just normal people. I feel like sometimes people stereotype a scientist, right? But anyone can be a scientist as long as, you're passionate and committed about what do you do.
Oh, I couldn't agree more. I think that's a wonderful message to send to our listeners. And I'm curious, in your lab, do you get the group together outside of the lab to do fun things together?
Yeah, so we often, of course, we go out to eat together. And, recently for Chinese New Year, everyone come to my house. We had a potluck, and we also play games. Science is hard enough, and we really have to enjoy it. So I feel like those activity, it's really important, like, for example, retreat, really to help for team building, especially for my lab. Everyone not only have to be independent individuals, but also need to be a team player, right? Mm-hmm. Not only you have to lead a project, but you also need to be a good team player when you're not the one who leads the project. So I feel like the team building is really important to be able to really work with each other, to look out for each other, to share the ideas, and giving advice without hesitation is huge. Like, I really actually benefit a lot from my trainees. I often encourage them to challenge me as well, because not like you just take advice from me, but also I want to do it to be able to bounce ideas. I want you tell me I'm wrong.
Right. So, it can be scary, but do it.
Like, by the time, you get your Ph.D. or you become an assistant professor, if you can just prove I'm wrong, I want you tell me how you want to tackle those problems. I think that's important. So those outside activity is really important for team building. We also have the lab retreat. We have all the sock and the T-shirt, and we have the lab logo. People put them on the computer. We wear the T-shirt. It's just like everyone is so proud to be part of the team. We all work together toward a bright future. I think that's what I really kind of facilitating for those team building.
Absolutely. I think getting people together, building this sense of camaraderie and getting people to know each other and see from each other's perspectives can be tremendously helpful, particularly in this interdisciplinary collaborative group that you're building there to tackle some big problems in science. And I know oftentimes things hold you back, whether it's funding, staff, technology, feasibility, or even just time and people. So if we took away, Lynn, the barriers that might hold you back, is there one particular research question that you would want to answer most?
I think there are too many questions we have to be able to answer to understand the brain dynamics. especially how the neurotransmitter modulators, neurochemicals work together to be able to coordinately determine or contribute to the brain state. But I think one of the questions is we often ask ourselves is, what is emotion, right? If we go to do a blood test, we know exactly the function of our organ, like either a kidney or heart. From the blood test, we pretty much know where we are, what's our health status. But we do not have a measurement for the brain, for the mental health. So that's something I'm really intrigued to study, to really understand what exactly emotion is and how those neurochemicals work together to determine the brain state and to be able to develop some novel treatment for mental health disorders.
Well, I think these are fascinating questions, and thank you for giving me and our listeners something to ponder this afternoon. And I know we've talked about a lot of different aspects of your career. I'd love to end with some advice here, Lin. If our listeners are on their own journeys out there and they are looking for advice, do you have a piece of advice that someone gave you at some point that really helped you that you can pass on today?
Yes. I think the best advice I have been given is actually from my dad. It's really helped me, especially when I'm in difficult time. It just never gave up and learn how to multitasking. So often, when we have challenges, especially, for me as a mom, as a scientist, I have to really learn how to multitask. Being able to do multitasking and has a strong will, never give up. I feel like being mentally strong is important to be successful or just to be able to swim through all the challenges in the life. I'm trying to become a better person today compared to yesterday, to be able to contribute to this community and to do something to help with humanity. I think that's my advice, is just never give up, be positive, and to learn how to multitask. Yeah.
I love it. Well, I think that is wonderful advice for our listeners. Is there any other last piece of advice or last message of inspiration you'd like to leave everyone with today at the end of our conversation?
I think the one thing I would to add is, my inspiration comes from my colleagues, from my fellow scientists, and also most importantly, coming from all the trainees. This next generation scientists. They are the one to really push the boundary of discoveries. I'm happy and I feel like I'm grateful to be able to work with those young, bright minds and to really help them to cultivate their career. So it's not about my success, it's about their success.
Definitely. And I think this mentoring aspect of careers in science is tremendously rewarding and something a lot of people enjoy. And if our listeners want to learn more about you and the wonderful people that you work with, Lin, what is the best way for them to do so?
Yeah, I think the best way to really know more about what we do is to visit our website. It's www.lintianlab.org, or just follow us on Twitter at Lin Tian Ph.D.
Perfect. Well, listeners, definitely get connected. Check out Lin's website. And Lin, it's been such a pleasure to have you on the show today. Thank you so much for your time.
Thanks, Marie, for having me. And thank you all for listening to this podcast. I also learned a lot just, having this conversation to think about my journey and, all the challenges we have faced as a scientist. Thank you for listening.
It's been great to chat with you, and listeners, always wonderful to have you here with us. We hope you'll join us again for our next episode of People Behind the Science.